The curse of awareness, why intelligence breeds uncertainty and ignorance breeds confidence. Have you ever noticed something strange, maybe even disturbing about the way certainty behaves in people? The ones with the loudest voices, the firmest opinions, the most unshakable beliefs are often the least informed. And the ones with nuance, the ones who hesitate, who say, "I don't know," who ask questions instead of giving answers, those are usually the thinkers, the readers, the observers. Why is that? Why do smart people doubt and fools never do? From the very first moment we begin to see the world in complexity, doubt enters the room like a shadow that never leaves. When you start to look deeply into anything politics, religion, science, human behavior, you quickly realize how little you actually understand. You peel back one layer, only to find another, then another, until you're staring into a tangled web of contradictions, paradoxes, and unresolved questions. And you realize certainty is a luxury of those who haven't looked closely. That's the paradox. The more you know how much you don't know.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But this isn't just an intellectual issue, it's deeply psychological. Doubt doesn't come from weakness. It comes from awareness. When you're intelligent, you see the gaps. You see the variables, the exceptions, the unknowns. Your mind isn't satisfied with a single answer. It plays devil's advocate. It entertains opposing views. It questions its own foundations. And all of that leads to one thing: humility. A deep, sometimes painful humility in the face of the universe's vastness. But here's the twist: fools don't experience that. Not because they're brave, but because they're blind. Have you ever watched someone speak with absolute certainty about a topic they clearly don't understand? It's not just ignorance, it's confident ignorance. And that's what makes it dangerous. This is the Dunning Kruger effect in full force. The less someone knows, the more they believe they know. Why? Because they lack the cognitive tools to recognize their own incompetence. They don't doubt because they don't see what's missing. Their world is simple, clean, black and white. And in that simplicity they find comfort, certainty, even superiority. But let's not just point fingers. Let's turn inward. How many times have you been certain about something only to discover later that you were wrong? And when that moment came, if you're honest, didn't it feel like a small ego death? That's what doubt really is, the ego being challenged. And smart people are more likely to experience this because they engage with complexity. They seek out information that contradicts them. They invite discomfort. Not because they enjoy the pain, but because they value the truth more than their pride. This is where the real philosophical tension begins. Doubt is not a flaw, it's a feature. It's the hallmark of a mind in motion. But here's the tragedy: we live in a world that rewards certainty, not curiosity. Think about it. Politicians are expected to have clear answers. Leaders are expected to be decisive. Influencers are expected to speak with confidence. No one wants to hear, "I don't know." So the doubters, the thinkers, the seekers are often sidelined, silenced not by force, but by the culture's worship of certainty. And yet, all progress begins with doubt. Every scientific discovery, every philosophical insight, every social revolution started with someone saying, "Maybe we're wrong." Copernicus doubted the Earth was the center. Darwin doubted creationism. Socrates doubted everything. Doubt is the seed of wisdom, but only if you're brave enough to let it grow. Let me ask you something that might shake you. When was the last time you changed your mind about something that mattered? Really changed your mind not because someone forced you, but because you dared to entertain the possibility that you were wrong. If that hasn't happened in a while, ask yourself, are you evolving or just reinforcing? Now let's talk about fear, because doubt isn't just uncomfortable, it's terrifying. Why? Because it threatens identity. If you start to doubt your beliefs, your worldview, your values, what's left? Who are you without your certainty? That's the real cost of intelligence. It forces you to live in ambiguity, to make peace with not knowing. And that's not easy. It's lonely, it's disorienting, but it's also liberating. Because once you stop needing to be right, you become open to growth, open to truth, open to life in its raw, chaotic, unresolved beauty. Contrast that with the fool. The fool lives in a closed world, a world of answers, not questions. A world where everything is simple, and everyone who disagrees is wrong. There's comfort in that, power even. But it's a false power. A brittle, fragile power that collapses the moment it meets reality. And yet fools dominate. Why? Because confidence sells, certainty persuades. The world doesn't reward truth, it rewards conviction. This is why the internet is flooded with influencers who know nothing but speak like prophets. It's why people fall for conspiracy theories. It's why demagogues rise. Because people are drawn to certainty, especially in times of chaos. But the truly wise person, the smart person, resists that temptation. They carry doubt like a compass, not because they're lost, but because they refuse to pretend they're found. And here's the tragedy wrapped in irony. Smart people often doubt themselves out of decisions, actions, and opportunities, while fools leap forward with reckless confidence. The world moves not because of the wise, but often in spite of them. The wise hesitate. The fool acts. And so the fool wins, at least on the surface. But beneath that surface, the fool's certainty is a mask for fragility. And the wise person's doubt is a doorway to deeper strength. You see, doubt doesn't mean paralysis. It means discernment. It means you pause, you reflect, you ask better questions, and then you move slowly, but with intention. That's the difference. Fools rush in, smart people measure, and sometimes, yes, they miss opportunities. But the ones they take with clarity, with alignment, with wisdom. So let me challenge you with another question. Are you willing to be the one who doubts while everyone else claims certainty? Are you willing to lose arguments, miss applause, be misunderstood because you'd rather be honest than loud? That's the price of wisdom. That's the burden of intelligence. But it's also the gift. Because in a world addicted to illusion, the doubter is the only one still searching for what's real. Let's now uncover what might be the most disturbing truth of all. Confidence, what we often admire, chase, and reward, is often nothing more than a mask. A beautifully polished, socially acceptable disguise for insecurity. And behind that mask, fear, fragility, a desperate need to not be seen. You've met people like this. You may have been someone like this. The louder they are, the more certain they sound, the less they tolerate questions, and the more afraid they are of being wrong. Because for many, being wrong feels like being worthless. Think about how society is structured. From school to careers to relationships, we're told that being right is everything. You get graded for correct answers, not for asking better questions. You get promoted for decisiveness, not for self-reflection. You gain respect by projecting certainty, not by admitting doubt. And so we learn from very early on that to be seen as intelligent, competent, or successful, we must never show weakness. Never hesitate. Never say, "I don't know." So we build the mask. And over time, the mask becomes us. But here's where it gets dangerous. That mask of confidence doesn't just fool others, it fools us. We start to believe it. We stop questioning our assumptions. We stop examining our biases. We stop listening. Because we've confused confidence with truth and doubt with failure. This is the illusion. And it's so seductive that even smart people fall into it. Especially when they're pressured to perform and to lead, to influence, to win. Now contrast this with what we explored earlier, the doubter, the thinker, the person who says, "I'm still learning." That person is often dismissed, too uncertain, and too soft, too academic. But what if that person is actually the most secure of all? Because they don't need the mask. They don't need to be right to feel worthy. They don't base their identity on being superior. They base it on being real. And realness, raw, vulnerable, open-minded realness, is terrifying in a world built on posturing. Let me ask you something confronting. How much of your confidence is real, and how much of it is performance? When you speak, do you speak to express truth or to avoid being questioned? Do you seek understanding or control? These are hard questions, but they matter. Because if your confidence is built on fear, it will fail you. It will crack the moment your beliefs are challenged. But if your doubt is built on strength, it will carry you through every uncertainty. This leads us to a core philosophical insight. Certainty is often a form of self-defense. It's the mind's way of anchoring itself in a chaotic world. When life feels unstable, when identity feels shaky, when truth feels distant, we cling to certainty like a life raft. We declare, "This is right. This is wrong." I know, not because we've thought deeply, but because we're scared of the alternative. Because doubt feels like drowning. But here's the irony. It's not doubt that drowns us, it's denial. Denial of complexity. Denial of nuance. Denial of the fact that life isn't black and white, it's chaos painted in shades of gray. And only the truly wise are willing to live in that chaos, to question everything, to be wrong, to evolve. Let's bring this home with something even more practical. Every day you're faced with choices that test your relationship with doubt. A conversation where you could admit ignorance or pretend you know. A decision where you could pause and reflect or rush in for the sake of image. A belief you've held for years that you now feel cracking. What do? Do you double down or do you let go? There's a word for this: intellectual humility. It doesn't mean you're unsure of everything. It means you're aware that every belief, every idea, every position you hold is provisional. It's subject to revision. It's open to improvement. And that mindset, that's the foundation of all true learning. It's what separates the wise from the arrogant, the seeker from the preacher, the philosopher from the zealot. But again, this kind of humility is hard. It requires you to admit that the ground beneath you is always shifting, that you'll never have all the answers, that you're a work in progress. And that's a scary realization. But it's also empowering, because it means you're free to grow, free to change, free to become something better than what you were yesterday. Do you see the difference now? The fool clings to certainty like a child clings to a blanket, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. The wise person releases certainty like a bird into the wind, not because they're lost, but because they trust the process of discovery. One is a prisoner, the other is a pioneer. And this brings us to the deeper question: what kind of person do you want to be? The one who always has the answer, or the one who always seeks a better one? The one who postures certainty, or the one who embodies curiosity? The one who wins debates, or the one who wins wisdom? Because here's the truth: no one tells you doubt is not the opposite of confidence. Doubt is confidence, real confidence. The kind that isn't afraid of being wrong. The kind that doesn't need to dominate. The kind that listens more than it speaks. That kind of confidence doesn't come from ego, it comes from self-awareness. And it's rare. So rare that when people see it, they mistake it for weakness. But it's not. It's power. Quiet power. Deep power. The kind that transforms everything it touches. And now let's bring it full circle. We started by asking why smart people doubt and fools never do. The answer is simple and profound, because smart people see. They see the limits of their knowledge. They see the complexity of life. They see the infinite variables, the unknowns, the contradictions. And in that seeing, they cannot help but doubt. Not because they're insecure, but because they're honest. The fool, on the other hand, doesn't see. They live in a small room with no windows. And in that room, everything makes sense. Everything is clear. Everything is certain, but it's not real. It's a fantasy. A fragile fantasy that shatters the moment reality walks in. So I'll ask you one final question for this part. Are you brave enough to doubt yourself so you can discover something deeper than your current truth? Because the journey doesn't begin with answers. It begins with the courage to ask better questions. The wisdom of uncertainty, why doubt is the path to real power. Now we arrive at the final and most profound realization: uncertainty, what most people fear, avoid, and reject, is actually the doorway to real power. Not power over others, not dominance, but inner power. The kind that can't be shaken by criticism, failure, or change. The kind of power that's grounded in truth, not illusion. And that power begins the moment we stop pretending to know and begin to truly seek. Let's start with a paradox: the more certain you are, the less you grow. Why? Because certainty closes the door. It says, I've arrived. It says I have the answer. And once you claim to have the answer, you stop looking. You stop listening. You stop evolving. In contrast, doubt keeps the door open. It says, I might be wrong. It says, there could be more. And in that space between what you know and what you don't is where transformation happens. This is why smart people doubt. Not because they're indecisive, not because they're weak, but because they know that power doesn't come from pretending, it comes from pursuit. The pursuit of understanding, of depth, of meaning. and that pursuit never ends. In fact, the moment you think it has, you've already started to decay. Let me give you a metaphor. Imagine truth as a mountain. The fool stands at the base, looks up, and says, "I see everything. I know what this is." They write books. They give speeches. They build belief systems around their limited perspective. But the smart person starts climbing. And the higher they go, the more they realize how vast the mountain truly is. They see new angles, new paths, new mysteries. And eventually they realize they'll never reach the top. And that's not a failure. That's wisdom. That's humility. That's freedom. Because at some point, every truly intelligent person comes to understand this. There are no final answers, only better questions, better frameworks, deeper insights, but no completion, no absolute certainty. And that's okay, because life itself is not a problem to be solved, it's a mystery to be lived. So why do we resist this so much? Why does uncertainty scare us? Because it exposes us. It leaves us open, vulnerable. And we're conditioned to believe that vulnerability is weakness. But that's a lie. Vulnerability, openness to the unknown, is the birthplace of authenticity, of creativity, of discovery. Without it, we're just parroting old ideas. But with it, we become alive. And this isn't just philosophy, it's practical. Think about relationships. The best relationships aren't built on rigid rules or fixed roles, they're built on curiosity, on the willingness to keep discovering each other year after year. Think about leadership. The best leaders aren't the ones who claim to have all the answers, they're the ones who ask better questions, who listen deeply, who adapt. Think about learning. The best students are the ones who keep their minds open, who challenge assumptions, who are willing to say, "I don't get it yet." That word "yet" is the key. Smart people live in the space of yet. They don't say, "I don't know," as a wall. They say it as a window, a door, a path. Let me ask you something bold. What if the thing you're most certain about is the very thing holding you back? Maybe it's a belief about yourself, or about other people, or about how the world works. Can you hold that belief up to the light? Can you question it without collapsing? Because here's the truth. If your identity requires certainty, it's not an identity, it's a prison. But if your identity can survive doubt, evolve with new evidence, embrace growth, that's real strength. That's what it means to be grounded, not in dogma, but in truth. And truth is not static, it's alive. It breathes, it expands, it contradicts itself. It humbles you. And only those brave enough to doubt their way forward will ever touch it. Now let's flip the lens once more. We've talked about the dangers of false certainty. But what about the power of true uncertainty? What if doubt wasn't something you suffered, but something you practiced? Imagine waking up every day with a mindset that says, "I don't know everything," and that's exciting. I might be wrong, and that's where I learn. There's more to this moment, this idea, this person than I can see right now. That mindset is not weakness. It's not indecision. It's wisdom. Deep, unshakable wisdom that can bend without breaking, that can evolve without losing itself, that can listen without needing to win. And in that space, you become powerful. because you're no longer threatened by new ideas. You're no longer enslaved by your past beliefs. You're no longer performing certainty, you're living truth. So what does this mean for your life right now? It means this: if you want to grow, you must doubt. If you want to lead, you must question. If you want to love deeply, you must listen more than you speak. If you want to be truly wise, you must be brave enough to say, I don't know, but I'm open. And that takes courage, real courage. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that whispers. That sits with the unknown. That stays curious. That refuses to settle for easy answers. Because here's the final paradox: fools are loud because they're hollow. Smart people are quiet because they're full of questions, full of nuance, full of awareness. And the wisest among us, they don't try to speak over others. They create space. They invite depth. They live in the mystery not because they're lost, but because they've found something deeper than certainty. And maybe that's what we're all called to do. So let me ask you one last time, one final piercing question. Are you willing to trade the comfort of being right for the power of being real? Because if you are, then you're already ahead of almost everyone. You're not just smart, you're wise. And in a world drowning in noise, that kind of wisdom is the rarest and most needed force of all.